We'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. And welcome to round 2 of this year's Learning Co-op, formerly known as round 3, but now round 2. I'm Julie Aubrey and co-presenting today with Stacy Wenzel. I know we're a little bit packed in here today. It's actually not too bad. If we have more people coming, there's room in the front, and we also have room 350 as an overflow, so we're streaming in there as well. Did you guys ever play the game of sardines when you were little? You know, one person would hide, and then as you found them, you would hide with them, and you didn't want to be the last person. So we're kind of like sardines today. But next time we'll be back in the auditorium. So let's get going. And let's kind of take stock again as to where we are. So in session 1, that seems like it's been a long time ago, but session 1, that was the overview. We were setting the stage. And if you remember, we talked about Domain 9 of the Public Health Standards, which is about program evaluation, and it's about continuous improvement. Because we want to make sure that as we're tracking our programs, what we're able to do is make sure that how we're doing it is going to meet the standards. We also talked about the level of responsibility for our programs. If y'all remember, we're not responsible for the entire population, but it's smaller scope. You remember that we also talked about program goal. We identified a goal for our program, and we talked about our customers. Do you remember the 2 different types of customers? Direct and indirect. Okay.
Be bold. Come on, you
guys gotta wake up. So direct customers, they benefit from our service, okay? And indirect, they're not the ones that are receiving the service, but they also benefit. Okay, that's going to be a theme throughout. And then also, Stacy introduced us to the program performance tracking steps, so we'll be continuing through those. All right, everybody remember that? So check on session 1. We completed the windstorm, check. Session 2. So now what we've done is we've taken what was going to be session 2, 3, and 4, and we've combined them. So I appreciate everybody's flexibility and staying a little bit longer today. I think we'll be fine. I don't really think that we're going to be crunched for time at all. We've made some adjustments. But now we're really going to be diving into the meat of everything. And so we'll be doing a lot more work today in class. And then next session, the last session is in a couple weeks. Again, we'll be back in the auditorium, and then we'll be finishing up everything and then really linking it in or bridging it into selection of quality improvement projects. So it links again into last year's co-op. We did want to talk a little bit more about the real reason that we canceled last session. We did get a little bit of flack on that. There was the windstorm, and as you know, that meant that a lot of us were out of power. And so Stacy and I were a little bit, reticent about having to come with greasy hair and not showering and presenting. But it wasn't just us. There were others who couldn't shower as well and who were getting a little grungy. And this is one of our staff members who hadn't showered. We didn't want anybody to have to sit by him. Do you not see who that is? You don't recognize who that is? You need help? Well, it's Brad. Can you not see the eyes? Can you not tell that that's Brad? So, Brad, we have a message for you. It's been loving payback from Stacy. Brad's the one who gave. Don't be giving us a bad time. This is what happens.
The next day, and he was giving me all sorts of grief about canceling. I was like, what happened? You pick on me.
Okay. So let's talk about questions and feedback that we got from the first session. From the first session, we found out from the evaluations that there was one thing that came out as most positive. Most positive comments that we got were that there was no homework. You guys are so predictable. We also were requested, some people don't like to be picked on. Stacy and I like to pick on you. So what we want to do is try and balance everybody sharing versus, we don't want one person to have to be sharing all the time. So if we don't have a lot of sharing, then what we'll do is we'll try and give tables the opportunities to share. So maybe we'll just pick on a table instead of individuals. And then we did identify the need to provide some clarification on a couple of things, specifically really the level that the co-op is at. Because last year we were talking about projects. This year we're talking about our programs. And so there was a little bit of maybe confusion about what the difference was. So let's go through that real quickly. When we're talking about evaluating and continuously improving, which we've talked about at the last couple of co-ops, really those concepts, they're applicable no matter what level you're at, whether you're at an organizational level in public health or a program or a smaller program process or a project. So think big and think small. So if we're talking big, for example, if you're talking about quality improvement at an organizational level, well, that's something that we do here, and it's something that is, think of it as system-wide, something that's system-wide that is, sorry, I'm just blanking, that is something that our administration, that's the word I was looking for, they've made a decision, and so it's really involves everyone. So when you're thinking about at an organizational level, some things that support us with our quality improvement would be our quality improvement plan, quality council, strategic plan, our community health improvement plan. Those are all systems wide, and they involve everybody, and things feed up into that. For program level, okay, that's not big, that's medium. But then when you think of small, that would be the quality improvement projects that we talked about last year. So you're looking at one little process and how you improve that. And when you think little feeding up into big, then you think, okay, this year's co-op, our programs are in between. So a program evaluation piece, which we're talking about now, from program performance measures or logic models, those are the bridge. So that bridges between a little quality improvement project all the way up to a big systems level administrative improvement. Does that make sense to people? So does that maybe clarify a little bit kind of the difference between last year and this year, kind of the level that we're at? Okay. So the other refresher, which it seems like we talk about at almost every session, but it's really important, we talked about last time, and we'll refresh it, method being like a recipe, and tools being like a measuring cup or spatula or something else that you use within the recipe. So the method is the series of steps, and the tools are things that make it easier that you use throughout. So let's apply that to some of the things that we talked about last year and this year. Let's start with the corners first. Last year we talked about quality improvement projects and we talked about quality planning. So some of the tools that we learned last year would have been fishbone diagram, everybody's favorite. We also came up with ways to gather voice of the customer, customer input. So those were tools that we used. In accreditation, some tools that we used some software. We used some spreadsheets, and then we also used mind mapping. Was it Mind Manager? Mind Manager. We used Mind Manager in order to combine everything. So we've got tools. Now this year we're talking same things apply, recipe versus tools. So the method that we're talking about this year, we're talking about program tracking, which is Program Evaluation Light or Program Evaluation 101, the basic. Now there is a more rigorous program evaluation for folks who are more into the research side. We're not doing that. We're just doing the basic 101. And we've already received some tools with that. We've got some worksheets, and there's some other data collection spreadsheets that we'll be using today. So you seeing method versus tools? Okay. So then let's go through the overview. For today, we're going to be talking about data, why data is important. Of course, Stacy's going to be doing that section. That's her forte. And then we'll be talking about performance measures. There are different types, so I'll bounce back in for that. And then we'll work on developing performance measures for your program, and we'll be going through the series of steps, so we'll be continuing through that method. And then we'll go into the workshop portion, and we should have plenty of time for that so that you can start working on your own programs and developing your own performance measures. But first, there's always a but first, isn't there? But first, a little bit about our dream jobs. That's the theme for this year. And I was doing a little bit of research on dream jobs and came up with something that surprised me. I thought dream job was maybe a more modern term. I thought it was something that we came up with, but no, that's not the case. Dream jobs have been around for a long time. Some dream jobs that I wouldn't have thought about have been around for a long time, like the help desk dream job. So I wanted to share that with you. Found a little bit of a little history lesson, a video on the medieval help desk, so we're going to look at that.
Broder Ansgar?
Ja.
Det er deg, ja.
Ja.
Så bra, ok.
Ja, hei du. Hei du. Ja.
Ja, hva gjelder det?
Ja, det er denne her. Ja, vil du sitte?
Takk.
Ja.
Jaha.
Ja, så jeg har ikke fått gjort noen ting hele formiddag, jeg.
Ok, nei, jeg beklager at det tar tid. Altså, skjønner vi holder på å legge om til et helt nytt system, og da skal alle ha hjelp på en gang. Vet du.
Ja, ja.
Så du kommer ikke inn i den, eller?
Nei, den bare ligger der.
Ok, har du forsøkt å åpne den?
Ja, åpne den, altså hvis det hadde vært så enkelt, så hadde jeg jo ikke tilkalt helpdesk, hadde jeg vel?
Nei, det er
Nei.
sant.
Nei. Vil du ha en kopp varmt vann?
Nei, da, det skal være fort gjort. Dette
Ja.
skal vi se. Du bare gjør der. Sånn.
Ja.
Da er du i gang.
Ja, altså så langt kom jeg også.
Ok.
Ikke sant? Men så stoppet det opp, og så var jeg redd for at noe av teksten skulle forsvinne, så jeg turte ikke å gå videre.
Åja, ok. Nei, men du skjønner at inni her så ligger det kanskje flere hundre sider med lagret tekst. Så for å komme videre så tar du tak i et ark på den måten her, og så liksom blar du over på neste side sånn. Da fortsetter teksten der.
Jeg blar, altså.
Du blar, ja.
Men når jeg skal tilbake da?
Ja, da bare blar du tilbake igjen. Tar tak der, og så gjør du sånn. Der, så er du tilbake til den teksten du hadde i stad. Ikke noe
Ok, så den
forandret.
slutter der,
Ja.
og så fortsetter den der, ja. Ok, men når jeg skal avslutte for dagen, hva gjør jeg da?
Da bare slår du sammen permene
Ja?
på den måten der. Sånn. Da er den lukket, da ligger alt lagret inni der.
Altså, jeg risikerer ikke å miste noe av teksten her nå,
Nei,
altså.
alt ligger lagret inni her nå.
Ja.
Da må du i tilfelle sette fyr på hele greia. Det er kanskje lite sannsynlig. Så.
Ja, ok. Nei, men for det er noe med det at ikke sant, når du har holdt på med skriftruller,
Ja.
så tar det litt grann tid å konvertere til å bla i en bøk. Ja, ja, det var TV.
Det er greit.
Ja, flott. Ja, men du, en til før du går. Jeg må bare gå gjennom en gang til. Altså, jeg åpner
Ja,
sånn,
ja, riktig.
og så, hva har du kalt det?
Blar.
Jeg blar,
Ja, bla videre.
blar frem og tilbake.
Ja,
Og når,
teksten ligger der hele tiden.
ja. Og når jeg er ferdig, så bare lukker jeg den.
Ja, riktig.
Flott.
Fint det.
Kjempefint.
Ja, flott det.
Ja, men du, vent, ikke sant? Nå er den sånn igjen, nå får jeg ikke åpnet den. Nå får jeg ikke åpnet den.
Ja, det er fra feil side. Du
Hva mener du?
må åpne fra andre siden.
Så det er ikke likegyldig, det,
Nei,
altså?
du må åpne fra den siden der. Sånn. Der. Der er den åpen.
Ja vel.
Har du
Ok.
lest manualen, eller?
Manualen?
Jeg skal følge med som manualen som brukerveiledning. Det er sikkert den der. Der, vet du.
Å ja,
I
den,
der
ja.
står alt sammen.
Ja, men ikke sant, der har du samme problemet. Får den ikke opp. Åpnet den, altså.
Ok, det skulle vi kanskje ha tenkt på.
All right. So the learning concept here is we want people to be able to describe, if you can't already, why it's important to use data. Are people already comfortable with why we use data in public health? Is there any doubters or disbelievers here? Just curious. No judgment if you raise your hand. Nobody's brave enough to raise their hand. Okay. So let's talk about the three different ways we can show our accountability. This is what it comes back to. So the first session we talked a lot about what are the accountabilities we have for managing our program and being leaders in the community on those big public health problems or issues. Do we remember the distinction about where our accountabilities really end and where we need to be a partner in improving things in the public? So what it all comes down to, though, is that we have to have the techniques to show how we're being accountable to the public, whether we're talking about big accountability for big public health issues with community partners, which a framework we use here in the community is collective impact, bringing a lot of people around the table to tackle big issues together. So there's some measurement work happening through United Way on collective impact efforts. But for our programs, we're really talking about using performance measures, program performance measures, those things that we are really intimately involved in developing and moving the needle on. Okay, so here's how I'm measuring if anyone's better off. Is anyone better off? These are all the changes, the before the end results that we can measure the change on. So I'm saying I'm going to measure how well I'm cooking my meals by adults with acceptable BMI. If I'm doing a good job providing healthy, nutritious meals, my family should be within reasonable, acceptable BMI. Dollar increase in home value per year might be a measure that I use to track how well I'm maintaining my house inside and out. Annual % increase in home value. Notice here that there's not a one-off. I think one of the benefits of using this model versus a logic model, people that have tried to use the logic model, because of the linearity of it, you want to do a one-off measurement for everything, when in fact, a lot of those activities contribute to just one outcome, right? And I like this because it breaks that linear thinking a little bit, and it allows you to kind of freeze that up. So these are what I think are important, and I could check whether or not these are important to my stakeholders, the people that fund my home and live in my home. Okay, so the other questions you can ask are, how are your customers any better off? Remember, direct and indirect customers. Can you measure any sort of change in increased knowledge and increased skills, changes in attitudes, behaviors, circumstances, or environments? All those things would be things that you can count changes in over time. So you can use that so what or logic, the results chain mentality of thinking to identify what changes your work is logically expecting to make happen. I teach classes so that, why would you teach a class? I teach class here so that you learn. I provide food to hungry people so that they're healthier, they're not food insecure. I immunize patients so that, I counsel clients so that, I educate policymakers so that we have a better place to live. Okay. So, what are the 3 types of performance measures?
How well, and is anybody better off?
Okay. All right. So I think at this point we're ready to break out, right? Okay. Okay, so we're going to pause now and start working on your own programs. Julie and I will walk around. Steve, unless you're working on something specific, I would ask you to walk around as well, because I know you're more than capable of helping too. So ask us questions, but I want you to take that worksheet that you started in the first session and now pull out the second worksheet. Pull out the second worksheet and start filling it out. So some tips and tricks. Get really specific with your measure, okay? But brain dump at this point in time. Do not start thinking about the feasibility or the practicality of whether or not you can get that data. Don't worry about that. I want you to think and brain dump at this time. Also remember that for each and every activity you do, you could actually fill out one of these. I don't think we have time for that, so I would say focus on one activity and fill this out. If you have time, you can do more. Ready, set, go. Hopefully you have some measures you've identified. All right, so then the next question you're going to ask yourself is, which of the measures that you've looked at are most important? Important in the context of which of them would be most important to improve, which of them might be most important to communicate to stakeholders. So those are the ways that you determine what's most important. So I'm not advocating that you will only focus on a handful of measures, but we're all busy people and we can only do so much at a time, and so we focus our improvement efforts. So we talked a lot about that in last year's Learning Co-op. So I want each of you to go back, not right this second, we're going to go through a couple more slides, but you're going to circle the measures that you deem are most important for your program success. Okay? You're going to circle those. Those are going to be called your headline measures. So going back to this example, I'm going to say, for my family, the most important measures that I work to improve are the percentage of meals served on time, because that's a quality of life factor for my family. It means we're spending more time together, we have a thoughtful dinner, we're not rushed. That's important. So I circled that. That's a headline measure for me. BMI is important. It's really relevant to our health. It's an indicator of, chronic disease potential. So that's important to me. And then home value, I'm saying that's important to me because I have ready data. So I want you to circle those things that are important that you either have data for already or that you could get relatively easy. So you're going to circle those. Circle 3 of them, or at least 1 if you don't have that many measures. Those are called headline measures. So here's my headline measures from my managing the household. This is going to matter a lot in the next section when we talk about improvement and when we talk about communicating our results, okay? So this is setting us up for the next session. So it's important to think about what are your headline measures. Now, likewise, what measures would you love to have? If you've done the work and I said brainstorm and think big, what would you love to have, what makes sense? And then we have to look through it through the eyes of what's feasible, what's practical. Donna just landed on a piece of information that she would really love to have. She doesn't currently have it. So that becomes a focus of a data agenda. It's data that you need to develop. You're saying it's so important for the success of my program. It's not data I currently have, but I'm going to work hard to develop the data to give me that information. That becomes the focus of your data development agenda. So headline measures, what you have right now or can easily put in place to start demonstrating and improving performance. What do you wish you have? And you wish so much that you had this information that you're willing to buy it because data does cost money to collect. That might be the stuff that you bring to the data center for us to help you collect that data. So headline measures, circle 1, 2, or 3, depending on how many you've been able to identify, and then circle 1 or identify one piece of information you wish you had but you don't, that you want to develop an agenda for. So in this example, I'm saying, boy, I'm not currently measuring food waste on my family's plates. And it matters because not only is it an indicator of whether or not I'm providing meals my family eats, healthy meals, but it's also an indicator of waste and it's money. So I'm thinking that's so important that I'm going to start identifying and weighing food pre-post on the plates. Silly, but that's my data agenda. So percent of food left on plate at end of meals. You put this all together in a data collection plan. We've seen these before. I want you to focus on the first 3 columns. Do not worry about these columns yet, but we're going to come back to them in the last session. You put your program measure here, as I did with my household management. These are all the very specific, measurable ways I'm monitoring my household. Okay, the red one is my data agenda. I don't have data for it, but I'm going to put it in my data collection plan, and I'm going to start implementing steps to take to start getting that data. What is the data source or tool that you're using to gather that information? Percent of meals. I have a spreadsheet log that I track meal times in. Home value. I can pull that from county tax assessments. It's already there. I just need to start tracking it better. I'm going to start weighing, doing a log weight in the bathroom scale. So that's my data collection tool there for BMI. And this one, I'm going to develop a food scale system and start logging weights. But I got to figure this process out further. So measure, data source, and then who's responsible? What happens when you don't assign responsibility to someone? It's not going to get done. It's just not going to get done. So I want you to start thinking about every measure and who needs to start being responsible for making sure that's collected and reported. Okay? So that would be the next step. And then the next one, we're going to be talking about how much did you do, how well did you do it, and then what do you do with all that data once you have it. So for the rest of the workshop, finish up on your measures, circle those that are most important, identify missing measures that you'd be willing to buy, and start to develop that data collection plan. I don't want people to feel overwhelmed, so if you don't currently have data collection plan for your program, just start with those headline measures. Start there and we'll build it up over time. I don't want people to get overwhelmed. It's not only the only data you're ever going to collect. You're going to build on it over time, but if you need to get started somewhere, start on collecting those 3 headline measures. Okay, questions at this point?